Hello guys, Season 13 has changed some things in regard to my preferred Ekko Jungle itemization and rune setup, so I thought I would make an updated guide. The biggest change was of course the addition of the jungle pets, but a lot of items and runes have also gotten buffed or nerfed a bit since last season, so Ekko has different options now. For the people watching this video that don't know me, I've played the last 2 seasons in Master Elo, playing mainly Ekko Jungle, and statistically I've been one of the best Ekkos on the EU West server, and while I'm definitely not one of the best players on the server, I can still teach you a lot about Ekko. Before we get into the video, I want to quickly announce that I've started working on my ultimate Ekko Jungle guide that I will be releasing sometime after I hit the 1000 subscriber milestone. I want the guide to be of extremely high quality and I expect it to be around 1 to 2 hours long. I will try to cover absolutely everything I know about Ekko there, so please be patient. So if you want to see that and you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. If you want to see me play live, you can also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ekkoliner, and if you're interested in getting coached by me, you can join my Discord and find all the information about it there. Let's first talk about the smite choice really quickly, since after trying out all the smites extensively, I believe blue smite is currently the best choice in basically every game. The movement speed helps Ekko tremendously in being able to get on top of enemies and be active on the map. It is also the only smite that increases your clear speed, since you'll run from camp to camp faster, making it the best choice for a gold hungry champ like Ekko. But every smite has its upsides. There are good Ekko players that always build red smite, for example, and green smite has the highest win rate if we look at UGG stats. In the end, it is a choice that will impact the outcome of the game much less than a lot of people think. Probably the most common question I get asked is Nashor's or Lichbane, so to give you a quick answer to this right away, build what you like. I have played over 200 Ekko games this season, making a point to try out as many different setups as possible for multiple games in a row, and my conclusion is that in the current state of the items and runes, it is mostly down to preference. I'm not saying that there is never a better option objectively, but the items you build will not make an impactful difference in most of your games. Since I'm sure some of you guys won't be satisfied with this answer, I will give you some guidelines and examples when I choose one over the other. In general, what you want to think about with this choice is, will I be able to auto-attack the enemies a lot? To answer this question, you should think about if you can get close to the enemies and stay on them, or if you even should, since some champions will simply beat you when you stay too close to them. If your answer to the first question is yes, then you build Natures. If you feel like you'll have to play the fights in bursts because you're either at a risk of dying or you won't be able to stay on the targets for long, then Lichbane should be your choice. Here are 2 very good examples of games that I played recently where I felt like my choices worked out perfectly. The first one is a game where I went for Lichbane. The reason I chose Lichbane here is because their bot side has very long range champions with good escape tools, making it difficult to get into their range and stay on top of them for long. Their top side features champions that will beat me in a fist fight if we are even, so I don't want to stay close to them for a long time either, and would rather fight in short bursts where they're not able to attack me a lot. In the game where I chose Natures, you can see that the enemies have 2 mages that will have a very hard time getting away from me once I'm on top of them, as well as a bot side that is focused on going in rather than kiting away, making it much more likely that I will auto-attack them more. The only champ in that team I don't really beat in a fist fight is the Wukong, but as I said, the item choice is not as impactful as a lot of people seem to think, so of course the Natures is still gonna help me kill him. Alright, with that out of the way, let's go over the core item builds. I personally have 2 different end builds that I go for depending on if I choose Nashor's or Lichbane as my second item. The choices you will have to make in both builds are always gonna be if you want to go for Sorcerer Boots or Mercury Treads, and if you need to build Void Stuff as your 4th item due to the enemies building MR. So let's talk about the boots first. Overall, this is a choice that is not very difficult in most games, since you either build Mercury Treads when you play versus a lot of CC, or you build Sorcerer Boots because you play against a team with a very low or dodgeable CC. The difficulty in this choice comes when you're solo AP on your team and playing versus a high CC team. The Sorks have great value when you're solo AP due to the enemies being unlikely to build a lot of MR, but at the same time, building them makes you more vulnerable. This choice comes down to confidence and many variables in the game, which I can't possibly cover in this video. Making the right choice frequently is something you can only learn by playing a lot and learning from your mistakes. I will say, however, that I have never felt like I lost a game because I built Mercs. Something I can't say for when I choose to be greedy and build Sorks in a game versus high CC enemies. When it comes to the choice of building Void Stuff, it is really not rocket science, however you should not only think about if the enemies are building MR, but also if the enemies that are building MR are your main targets. You will often find that the squishy targets in the enemy team won't be able to build MR items, at least not early enough. So if you find yourself in a game where your main objective is to pick off the enemy carries, which it is in most games, then it might be the right choice to not build void stuff, even if some of the enemies are building MR. These choices are also impossible to explain with satisfying detail in a video like this due to the endless amount of variables, and I'm sure even I make the wrong choice frequently. So as with the boots, the only way to get better at making the right choices is by playing the game and getting experience in different scenarios. Okay, so here's my Nashor's core build. First of all, I want to say that in my opinion, going for Rocket Belt first is basically always better, and don't even think about building any other mythic. To me, Ekko doesn't even feel like a full champion until I have Rocket Belt completed. I've tested going for Nashor's first, but it has felt much less consistent since you're not only missing out on a lot of kills due to the range you're missing, but you're also more vulnerable, making it more likely to die. The argument that you clear the jungle faster with Nashor's is pretty irrelevant in the current meta, and also the clear speed increase is not nearly as big as a lot of people make it out to be. The only time you should ever build Nashor's first, if you're a fan of it for some reason, is when you're playing against a team full of champions that don't want to kite you. The next questions you might have is, do I upgrade my Dark Seal and when do I do it? And again, there are endless variables in this question, such as how many stacks do I have on my Dark Seal, how likely is it that I die, how likely is it that we will win the next big fight, how hard do I need to carry, and many more. In general, I would say if you have 10 stacks and you're ahead, you should always upgrade it. If you want to improve, I recommend you to upgrade it as often as possible and simply learn from your mistakes. The point at which you want to upgrade really depends, but most of the time I find myself upgrading it after Nashor's and before Rabadon's. However, this choice will always be impacted by the questions I mentioned earlier and by the gold you have available. There is a cutoff point when Void Stuff is the higher damage choice as a third item over Rabadon's, and that used to be when enemies hit 65 MR. Nowadays I'm not sure since the magic pen got nerfed a bit. However, I personally never choose Void Stuff as my third item over Rabadon's, since the AP scaling from Rabadon's not only affects your damage to champions, but also your W shield, ult heal, and clear speed. And as I said earlier, your main targets in most games are not gonna be able to build MR, at least not by the time you're building your third item. As you can see, my last item choice in this build, if I don't need Void Stuff, is Lichbane. There is this notion among a lot of low elo Ekko players that you should only build either Nashor's or Lichbane, but I honestly don't know where it stems from. The fact alone that the biggest question is Nashor's or Lichbane should already tell you that they're both very good items for Ekko, so why would it be bad to have both of them in the same build? There simply aren't any better last items in my opinion in this build. Cosmic Drive to me has felt like a worse Lichbane, and I think that's how it should be since it is more of a mage item now. And Shadow Flame is also a really good AP item, however this build is not focused on one-shotting. If you want to switch out your boots, I think the best choice here is Cosmic Drive since it gives you movement speed, so with all your items combined you will still be very fast. However, you should only ever do it if it's Sorks, since you will need the tenacity in games where you choose mercs, especially in the late game. Now I will quickly go over my Lichbane core build. The only real change here is that the last item is Shadow Flame if Void Stuff is not needed, since this build is focused on actually one-shotting. In general, I would say that I'm more likely to choose Sorks in this build, since they're often needed to be able to really one-shot. Since your plan isn't to auto-attack a lot, Nashor's doesn't really fit here in my opinion. However, it is still a very good item even in this build. So if you get to the point where you can swap out your boots, you should again do it for Cosmic Drive. You might be wondering why there hasn't been any mention of Zhonya's or Banshees, and I believe that both these items are very situational and building them frequently will make you a worse Ekko player in the long run. With his W and ult, Ekko has all the tools he needs in his kit to not need a defensive item in most games. The biggest mistake I frequently see low elo Ekkos make is building Zhonya's in every game, and even worse if it's their third item before Rabadon's. This takes away a massive amount of carry potential and is simply not needed. Zhonya's is a very good item against champs like Rengar or Kayn, but even in these matchups you should not build it before Rabadon's in my opinion. This is really just my personal opinion though, since there are definitely good Ekkos that build Zhonya's frequently. I will say however that Zhonya's value also increases drastically in higher elos compared to low elo, so if you're below masters I think you should not find yourself building Zhonya's in more than 5 out of 100 games. Banshees I build even less than Zhonya's, since in most games where I want some MR I can simply build mercs, so the only time I think Banshees is worth it is if you're literally playing against a full AP team. In my opinion it is best to learn to play Ekko without these defensive items and only build them when their value is very high. With the item builds out of the way, let's go over the different rune setups. Probably equally as common as the Nashor's or Lichbane question is the Dark Harvest or First Strike question. And my answer here is gonna be the same, that it is mostly down to preference. In my recent experience, however, I will say that I think the lower the elo, the better First Strike is. First Strike lets you play more around yourself, while Dark Harvest forces you to collect stacks throughout the game, which means you will have to fight a lot with your team. In lower elos, Ekko is a champ that can easily carry the game by himself, so playing around yourself there is a very good way to climb. In higher elos, however, you will often need to have an impact on your lanes to win the game, so taking First Strike there can be too passive, at least in the current meta. Electrocute is also a viable rune in the jungle, however it does get outscaled by Dark Harvest. The upside here is that it doesn't force you to fight a lot, and it still helps you get kills in the early game. So here is my Dark Harvest rune page that I have had a lot of success with recently. A small note here is that I have started going for double adaptive force over the attack speed in games where I build Lichbane, since it slightly increases the one-shot potential, and it has felt pretty good. I don't think I really need to explain most of the choices here. The only thing that is worth talking about is the Futures Market choice over Cosmic Insight. In my opinion, both runes are very good for Ekko, however Futures Market is definitely more impactful, and I personally even struggle to play in some games where I don't have Futures Market. Hitting item spikes is Ekko's biggest priority, and Futures Market helps tremendously with that. My main First Strike rune page looks like this. Here you can also make the choice of Eyeball Collection or Sudden Impact in your secondaries, but I believe that Sudden Impact is usually better, especially since you don't need to stack it first. But either one is good, and Eyeball Collection probably outscales Sudden Impact slightly. The only change to these rune setups I sometimes make is to go for Triumph and Legend Tenacity for my secondary runes, since in some games where the enemies have a lot of CC that can be layered, you might need more than 30% Tenacity from Mercs. Another scenario where I might take these secondary runes is when I want to be able to build Sorks, but I need Tenacity. One question that sometimes gets asked is if you should go Conqueror against tanky high CC teams, but in my opinion you really shouldn't. Conqueror is not terrible on Ekko, but it also doesn't really fit his optimal playstyle well, since he usually wants to go in and out of fights, playing around his cooldowns. And in that time you might often lose your stacks. As I said before, Ekko's power mostly comes from his items rather than his runes, so having runes that help you snowball early and generate gold is simply more useful, and Conqueror is definitely worse at that than the other choices. In conclusion, while items have the biggest impact on Ekko's strength, in the current meta most of the choices come down to personal preference and playstyle. I hope this video answers all the questions you guys might have, and if it didn't, feel free to ask in the comments and I will try to answer. Also, in my livestream I will usually talk about the choices I make and why I make them, so feel free to drop by if you want to learn more about Ekko. When I hit 1000 subs on YouTube, I'm also gonna do a 10-hour livestream as a celebration, so stay tuned for that. And with that, I hope you have a great day, my fellow Ekko enjoyers.